Welcome to Chronic Curiosity, where we have real conversations with real people, from everything to anything, in attempts to facilitate dialogue with our fellow humans, and hopefully your curiosity as well as ours. If you can withstand the show, we ask, most importantly, that you tell your friends and family, but also you can pick up some merch or just donate to the show at chronic-curiosity.com in USD or Bitcoin. If you feel so obliged, you can give us a good rating and follow on whatever podcast platform you so choose. But please feel free to reach out to us on the website or the socials, which can also be found on the website, chronic-curiosity.com. And here we go.
Check.
Nice and loud and clear.
Yeah,
I hear you.
We're good.
I hear you, good sir.
Good buddy.
Good. I hear you, good buddy. Yeah. So I think that we're going to do a little more, at least start off directional and go from there. We've had a couple guests on recently that we've just kind of gone and talked about and their things and what they're doing. Last was it Tim and Ryan the last 2 weeks. It was really good. I got a ton of awesome feedback from those two. People just love eat up that entrepreneurship, man.
Yeah.
People chasing their dreams, which we love. We haven't covered some news stuff in a while, and I think it's been one of those things you mentioned earlier, going around, and so I think we'll have that discussion around that. But as always, I like to go deeper. I was listening to a conversation, I think it was this week earlier, and the guest on the show, I don't even remember who it was, but they had a very critical thinking, type of mind. And it was always, he said, like, I like to always try to go 10 questions deeper. Don't stop. Once your first question, like, dig deeper, go deeper, ask 10 more questions, the whys, the whats, the hows, the whos, and you really dig down into it to really get a comprehensive understanding of what's going on. And I've been kind of having a similar discussion professionally, I guess. And anybody that works for a company or, has been an employee somewhere at some point, most people can understand that companies have policies and procedures, and whether they be safety related or, specifications that they have to meet, whatever it is.
Mandatory vaccines.
I wasn't going to go there.
I
Just in general, like policies and procedures. And I've been having I had a really good conversation the other day with somebody about the what's and the whys. Particularly in a corporation or a company.
Who, what, why, when, how?
What? I understand what we're doing. A lot of times as a corporation or an employee, what? You understand what you're doing, right? I'm doing this because these are the rules. I'm showing up at 7:00 because these are the rules, right? So I have to clock in at 7. So what am I doing? I'm clocking in at 7:00 because those are the rules. But why are you doing it? That's the question I think a lot of people never ask, and never even venture down, is why? Why are we doing this? Particularly with bigger companies, or, this is the easiest way to relate it. What's the why is, let's see what you're looking. The why is what is the product? What's the end result? Why are you doing it? You're doing it for the end result, right?
Yeah.
It should be. So it's why do I have to clock in at 7:00 in the morning? Well, because that's when production starts. If I work at a factory and I'm making brake pads, well, that's when the shift ends. The, third shift ends and first shift begins. That's at 7:00. So we have to have people there in order to continue to run the machines, because it takes 50 people to run all these machines, to do all the processes all the way down the line to perform the job. So what we're doing, clocking at 7:00, makes sense, because the why is because that's when the shift change. right? Makes sense. But there was a conversation I had that was the what was, well, we're following specification and we're doing this because this is what, as a company, we say we do. And these are the guidelines, these are the rules. And then it was, well, why are we doing this? Well, the why is it's a risk and timeline equation. So during this timeline, say this timeline's 5 years. So we're looking out 5 years. Well, in the next 5 years, we have to ensure A, B, and C. Okay. So the why is we are ensuring that A, B, and C happens within the next 5 years. Well, then what happens when not only we're doing something now so we can ensure A, B, and C for the next 5 years, but what if what we're doing, it does ensure that, but what if we didn't do it? It would still have the same end result in 5 years. Is there a reason to do the thing we need to do if we still have the same result if we don't act? All right, well, maybe we're ensuring that result in 20 years. Is it still worth doing? Like, because then once the further your timeline goes out, the more factors you have to bring into it, right? So if it's, let's see if I can think of an example off the rip. How about this? Your roof. Okay. Everyone's kind of familiar with this. Your roof lasts for so long, typically, unless something comes along or if whoever did it before you didn't spend so much. So if you say an average roof lasts 30 years, we'll just use general numbers. So let's say your roof was redone 15 years ago and it looks like it's a typical roof with shingles and it's going to last 30 years. Well, a contractor comes in and says, well, and after 15 years and goes, well, you got a little bit of damage here, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, whatever. Like, we think you should replace the roof. Well, no, let me back this up. Let's say we get to 30 years and we go, well, 30 years, that's how long they say it should last. So now we need to replace the roof because it's been 30 years. Okay. Well, what if the roof is still functioning perfectly? And a professional looks at it and goes, that doesn't know that's been there for 30 years and goes, I'd say you got probably another 10 years on this. It looks pretty good. There's for sure, like, there's no reason to redo this roof. So do we redo the roof at 30 years because that's what the specifications were? Or do we consider what we're doing and go, well, there's no reason to do this now. Why are we incurring this cost if we don't have to? Whether that be, an emotional cost or a financial cost or a respect cost to your customers. Sometimes companies have to do things that their customers don't love, but sometimes they just have to be done, whether it be safety or, public safety or, the emotional state of other people. Like, do we have to do this? And why are we doing this? Are we doing this just because it's what we has said that we're supposed to do for the specifications, or are we doing it because of a certain reason? So it was really interesting and I've seen a lot of conversations recently that are very, very in-depth and deep conversations that people are only being surface level with and making quick snap judgments or, we've talked a lot about that, where you see something and people have this quick judgment, whether it be, some of the political stuff recently it's easy to point out because everyone knows about Afghanistan, pull out in Afghanistan, how, what, why did this happen? What should we have done better? All these things, playing Monday morning quarterback or, Ukraine and Russia thing going on. Is it the what's and whys to the political aspect of what Putin's doing and what the United States doing and what Ukraine government's doing? Okay, we can talk about those things and discuss those things, but there's also other things happening that are underlying, like what's happening to the civilians there. Like those people are being impacted, regardless of whatever else is happening. Something else is always happening on the side. So it's really interesting to have these conversations with people that are open-minded and say like, well, this, well, okay. So you bring up point A. What about point B, C, D, E, F, all the way down? And then people are like, well, yeah, but point A. Like, okay, we got point A. Let's move on. Like, let's separate these things. Just like when we talked about when the Ukraine thing first started happening, it was like, we understand that like there's things happening, there's bad things happening, but let's get past that and look at what's happening to the civilians, what's happening to the, you know, the Ukrainian, if all these things are true, like that Ukrainian men can't leave the country. They have to fight. Okay. What happens? What do you think a lot of those Russian soldiers, do you think they want to be doing this and killing, like, cause a lot of those people are family members, Russia, Ukraine, like, so like, we can't just blanketly label all Russians bad. That's a pretty narrow-minded view. You know what I mean? Like, well, I just saw in the Boston Marathon, like 3 days before or whatever, a couple days before it started, anybody from Russia or Belarus, nope, can't do it. What? Just because they're Russian. Like, so, okay, like now we've gone so far in the past few years of wanting to break down and disintegrate discrimination against somebody just because of what they were born with, to, well, now it's okay because these people's governments are bad. What? So there's a lot of, if we can look deeper into something, in being able to be meticulous about specifics, you know, and what they mean. And a lot of that, what we're going to kind of discuss on is coming down to a legal level. Like anybody that's ever been involved in any type of legal situation, or if you know an attorney well, or like have done any type of, you know, I'm not an attorney. I haven't, you know, studied for the bar exam or anything like that, but I've dealt enough with them to get a new perspective on what laws mean and how words are used. Very specific. And obviously it comes into trouble when we've discussed how people are changing definitions of words. So like maybe we're using words that mean different things to us both. So like being able to drill down into the very, very specifics and trying to categorize and separate and maybe compartmentalize some of those things is a good thing. Because if you don't understand all the pieces of the puzzle, how can you truly put the puzzle together in its entirety? So on that note, the what's and whys and being able to connect those things is interesting, because we've had a lot of, in the news, there's been a lot of the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida, right? And then the other end of that is I don't know what they call it, the don't groom our kids bill or something, like whatever it is, like the other side's calling it. So you have one side saying this bill going into place in Florida is saying that you can't say gay, right? Because I've seen so many protests like gay. There, I said it, ha ha ha. Don't like, well, and the other side's like, well, look, this has nothing to do with don't say gay. Like it has to do with about grooming our children. And I haven't taken a deep dive into it. I don't know if you've read much of the bill or looked much into it, but it seems to be a contentious point for a lot of people. And I feel like a lot of those people haven't read the actual bill and understood what's in it. I don't know. Do you know anybody that's actually like gone through it?
No.
And that's complaining about it? That's actually read, like try to figure out what's going on?
No. I mean, it almost kind of reminds me of the Kyle Rittenhouse thing.
Mm.
It's
similar.
Yeah. Once it went to trial, all of a sudden you're like, wait a second.
Wait a minute. He didn't shoot black people?
Not even remotely what the media reported. And yeah, so it'll be interesting. I know you said you pulled up a pretty good article.
Yeah, I did. And I want to read the entire article. But before I do that, I want to tell a little story. that kind of connects to this and kind of connects to everything I just said. I chided. Chide? Is that a chided? Is that like a repercussion type? Is that a word? Chide?
Maybe not one I'm super familiar with.
I don't know where my phone. Because I might have to read this. I feel like chide. I feel like chide's like you not necessarily discipline, but correct, or is that right? There's a word I'm looking for.
Scold or rebuke. Oh, yeah. To
Okay.
chide. Yeah.
Yeah. To scold mildly, as to correct or improve, reprimand, to express disapproval. See, every once in a while I get one right. I don't know where I pull them from, but I get it right.
Yeah, seeing it written, like I would have known what that was, but when you said, I've heard like chide, but chided, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm not going to go that far into it.
No. I'm not saying you're wrong.
Maybe.
I'm just saying
but that's what I want. So I was watching a documentary with my daughter the other day, and just to give some background, it was I think I mentioned it, the life below zero, the people that live along the Arctic Circle, and this one lady, it's a really neat. It's family friendly, like really fascinating show.
So that stretch that freezes over and you can walk from Russia to here.
No, that's the Icelandic bridge, but yeah, they live up there. Like they definitely live up there. Like this one lady, this particular lady, I think she helps run a research facility that's literally on the northern coast of Alaska.
Ooh.
The northern coast of Alaska. Yeah, Google that motherfucker. Like it's like 200 miles north of the Arctic Circle.
Jeez.
Yeah. So she had been, and I think she had been attacked by a grizzly at one point that like, I guess had its jaws around her head. And she said, like, she mentioned during the, like, you could, when you can feel your skull being, what'd she say, compromised. And I was like, ooh, that's a good word. To be able to, like, having a bear, like thinking about having a bear's mouth around your head and being able to describe it as feeling your skull compromised.
I think I'd go for a stronger description than that.
Yeah, but I don't know if
she lived. So
yeah, I don't know if she ended up having any I don't know all the details of it because we've only watched a little bit of it.
Wait, hold on, real quick. Was this bear attack up there?
Yes, it was in her research facility. So what she so just so people understand, like,
I think a grizzly's like that far north.
I think she said it was a grizzly.
No, I believe you. I mean, because they have the grizzly polar bears that mate, so obviously the region.
Yeah, I mean,
just curious.
When you're out, you're the only food out in the middle of nowhere. Like, guess what? They're going to come knocking. But she has to like travel. I want to say it's like 300 miles north of the Arctic Circle, which is like halfway through Alaska. So that's way up there to begin with. And then she has to take a bush plane that lands on snow another like 2 hours to get to her camp. And that's the only way people can get to her is a fucking bush plane on snow. That, you know, up in that area, you get a little bit of a storm. You can't exactly, like, so there's time.
You better be pretty well-rounded in a lot of subjects.
Yeah. Like she has hundreds of gallons of like fuel and all these, like she's like a big encampment, but at times she's the only one there and that's it. So she had gone through this bear attack. Obviously that's pretty frightening. And then she was doing something at her camp at one point and she fell off a ladder and broke her ankle or something, I think. So then she has to crawl to whatever, call in for help. The plane flies an hour and a half, whatever it is, and then flies her an hour and a half back. And then she had to have reconstructive surgery on her leg and she had been away from the camp for 3 months. So then she's trying to get back. And of course it's dramatic and there's a storm coming. Or like I think when they took off and like there was something wrong with the plane and they had to like circle back and land. She's like, I need to get home. There's a storm coming. Who knows how much of that is true? But I feel like it's pretty true that she lives on the northern coast of Alaska in this research facility all by herself. And when she was leaving the hospital talking about this, going all the way back to watching this with my daughter, she was smoking a cigarette and talking about these things. And, you know, she's 10, you know? So like, she was like, she shouldn't be complaining about her health if she's smoking a cigarette. And I was like, I paused the show. I said, whoa. I said, that's a grown ass adult. I said, she had a bear that almost crushed her skull and ate her and she broke an ankle. Is she complaining about lung
COPD
cancer
or emphysema? Yeah.
Yeah. Is she complaining that she can't do the work because she can't breathe or any? No. So stop. Like, I get it. If you think it's gross, if you think smoking is disgusting, I get it. But she's not complaining about anything to do with smoking. So like, we're all like, when you get older, like everybody has to take their own chances and, you know, their own risks and do what they want to do. Now, if she would have been complaining about like emphysema or like, oh, I can't do it because I can't breathe. Like, all right, then, hey, dumb bitch, maybe you should stop smoking fucking cigarettes. But, or like, hey, I can't pay the bills as you pick up your 24 pack and your pack of cigarettes or whatever it is. Like, all right, those are two different things.
Sure.
But recognize what you're saying as you're saying it and how it pertains to everything in this story. And she was kind of like, I don't think she was real happy about it, but she kind of understood where I was coming from. So like, we all like, whether it be, you know, we talk about driving in a car, that's dangerous, right? Thousands of people die every year from you're just going to stop driving in cars because you can die from it. Like, okay. Like, we have to be reasonable and we have to look at situations on the whole spectrum to be able to understand all those things. So that brings us to the article that I told you about. And I'm going to, it might be a little whatever, but it was a really good article. And it was actually from NBC, which was kind of surprised me, and how I feel like how good this article was written. Let me see if, that's not what I want. If I can figure out how to switch this from here, because we're operating without the castle today. Oh, here it is. Like this. Yeah. All right. So this was an NBC article, and I'm just going to read the whole thing. It was written by Matt Levaitz. I don't know. It's on the screen. But so let's talk. Here's what Florida's Don't Say Gay bill would do and what it wouldn't do, which is already funny because like you feel like the title of these things, like we're going to tell you, or I love those, the titles of the articles, like the Ukraine war or Don't Say Gay bill or whatever it is, COVID. Here's what you need to know. And it's like, well, I'm already suspect, but, so legal experts dissect whether the bill would prevent the instruction or discussion of sexual orientation and gender identity, in which grade levels would be affected. So debate over state legislation that affects the LGBT community rarely leaves the halls of state capitals. But for Florida's Parental Rights and Education Act, which critics have dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill, has suddenly sparked a national war of words. In recent weeks, leaders of the global corporations, editorial boards of major newspapers, and Hollywood actors have all weighed in on the proposed legislation, with some calling it deeply disturbing and others non-controversial. Kate McKinnon ripped into the bill during a recent Weekend Update segment on NBC's Saturday Night Live, which who gives a fuck? But the host of the ABC talk show The View mulled over the policy for more than 7 minutes on air last month. I love that. More than 7 minutes they talked about this. Like, oh, so you basically just mentioned it and that was it and went to a commercial break.
Oh.
And Bravo's Andy Cohen dedicated a closing segment of Watch What Happens Live last week to slam the measure. The bill has even prompted President Joe Biden, who has seldom weighed in on the recent slate of state bills concerning LGBTQ people, who used the bully pulpit of the White House to rebuke the Florida measure and its sponsors. The bill even appears to have caused a rift between Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who has said he supports the bill but hasn't signed it yet, and Disney CEO Bob Chapek, which I think he signed it the other day.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure this is a done deal now. This article was written like a week ago. Supporters of HB 1557 say it would give parents greater control of their child's education, vindicating their parental authority. Conversely, opponents say it would unfairly target the LGBTQ community, particularly gay and trans students, and is, quote, pretending to solve a problem that doesn't exist. So which is it? For starters, criticism that the Don't Say Gay bill does not, in fact, say gay anywhere in the text is true. The bill which passed Florida Senate last week and the State House of Representatives in February does, however, contain the terms sexual orientation and gender identity each twice. But legal experts say that whether the bill prohibits the word gay itself is a distraction. In the same way that critical race theory isn't being taught in schools, that hasn't stopped people like the governor of Florida from deploying the term critical race theory in efforts to engage in certain kinds of political maneuverings. That's well said there. Political maneuverings. said Charlton Copeland, a professor at the University of Miami School of Law who writes about sexual orientation and gender identity. The Don't Say Gay moniker is a moniker about a certain political framing of the situation. It's another good way to put it. When you realize like some of these, the way people are pushing things and the way it's advertised, it's never exactly what it says. This is what you need to know. You know, kind of one of those things like, we'll tell you, let us tell you what you need to know about this. Beyond branding, a core argument over the bill centers around whether it prohibit the instruction or discussion of sexual orientation. The bill's sponsors have emphatically stated that the bill would not prohibit students from talking about their LGBTQ families or bar classroom discussions about LGBTQ history, including events like the 2016 deadly attack on the Pulse nightclub, which was the gay club in Orlando. Instead, they argue that the bill would bar the instruction of sexual orientation or gender identity. But the text says both. In its preamble, the bill's authors write that their aim is to prohibit classroom discussion about sexual orientation or gender identity. But later, the actual bill states that classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur. This is a quote. I could see why people are confused by that, said Clay Calvert, a professor at the University of Florida Levin College of Law who specializes in freedom of speech. I have no idea why that's still left up there, but that's not part of binding legislation that DeSantis would sign, Calvert added, referring to the word discussion in the bill's preamble. Basically, all of that language is just telling us what the bill is about, Calvert said, contending that the text in the bill's preamble would have no real-life consequences. They bring Copeland, the other guy they mentioned, disagreed. One of the things I would have told my students in the fall when I taught them statutory interpretation of one of the things that courts certainly do is to look at the preamble to assess. What's the scope of that term called instruction, Copeland said. And the preamble seems to have a conception of what is prohibited that is much broader than we might think of a cramped conception of instruction. He added, a good lawyer in a local school district, a good lawyer in the State Department of Education is going to do exactly that. So this is where we start to talk about lawyers and legal writings and all the words and all the things like they're written very specific ways to mean very specific things. Regardless, it remains unclear what the instruction of sexual orientation or gender identity entails. A definition of that type of lesson is not in the bill's text. Without a clear description, Calvert said, teachers may legitimately fear being sued for a wide variety of classroom instruction, including lessons concerning same-sex marriage or the history of the AIDS epidemic. This quote, if a student raises a question that is not part of the lesson plan or the instructional plan of a teacher, but that question ties to sexual orientation or gender identity, then what may the teacher say at that point, Calvert said. Calvert raised the prospect of answering a student's question about how same-sex couples marry each other. Am I teaching about what the Constitution says in that case, or am I teaching about sexual orientation, he asked, which is, I think, a legitimate question. Then it goes on, the bill sponsors did not directly answer repeated queries to provide examples of instruction of sexual orientation or gender identity during House and Senate debate. When asked by a Democratic lawmaker to explain what the instruction of sexual orientation or gender identity would look like, Republican State Rep Joe Harding, one of the bill's sponsors, read the definition of the word instruction from what appeared to be a dictionary. Vagueness is deployed for certain purposes. People aren't vague just because they're ignorant. They're not vague because they're sloppy. They're not vague because they're lazy, Copeland said. Sometimes they're intentionally vague to move the site of where the political fight is going to take place. I like that. I mean, I don't know who this Copeland guy is, but I think he's right on that. I'll agree with him there. So which age groups the bill would apply to has also sparked fierce debate in recent weeks. The text states that teachings on sexual orientation or gender identity would be banned in kindergarten through third grade or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. Critics have said the language of this provision could open districts and educators to lawsuits from parents who believe any conversation about LGBTQ people or issues to be inappropriate regardless of the child's age. Legal experts agree, but dispute that a parent's interpretation of what is or isn't age appropriate would hold up in court. Nonetheless, Calvert said, it remains to be seen what age appropriate or developmentally appropriate means, according to the state. A clause on the final page of the bill to require the Florida Department of Education to update the state standards in accordance with the requirements of this act by June 30th of 2023. The Department of Education has some leeway here to review its own standards about what is age appropriate, and then those who will influence how this bill is actually implemented, Calvert said. In other words, it could stretch higher than third grade. Copeland added that the mere threat of lawsuits would complete the bill's work. This kind of ever-present possibility of having to defend oneself of a school district having to spend resources will have its own chilling effects, he said. If signed by DeSantis, which I believe it is at this point, who is widely seen as eyeing a run for the 2024 GOP presidential nomination, I don't know why they have to put that in there, and has signaled support for the measure several times, and the legislation will go into effect July 1st. So there's obviously a lot there. But I think there's some really good points, and it just makes it even muddier of when we're looking at something specific. The more you drill down to be specific on something, the grayer it usually seems to get. So like, I read that and I was like, wow, this is actually a pretty well written article. It's not necessarily, it didn't feel to me that they were driving one way or the other. It presented a little bit of both sides. Obviously with the guy, like there was,
I thought a slight lean in there. I feel like it, but that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, we're always going to have slight biases to what, like, especially, in mainstream media, but I thought coming from an NBC,
sure,
writer, I'm like, oh, okay. Like this seemed like it did a pretty good job of kind of laying out, and it didn't go much into like how the other side calls it grooming and all this other stuff, which I would like to see a good argument for and against on, like, all right, the same thing is, we're calling this the Don't Say Gay bill. Well, that's kind of disingenuous because it never says anything about you can't say gay. That's ridiculous. Like, I get what they're going for, but like, it doesn't say you can't talk about it. It just says, it seems to be, and I think even that article would say, like, it's talking about instruction, which that's where we boil it all the way down to, okay, what are we okay with? What are we not okay with? Like, I don't know, I guess, do you have any additional or new thoughts on that after that article? Because I know we talked earlier about, like, neither of us have really dived into it, but I know that there was one side saying, hey, this is Don't Say Gay bill. No. But then it's like, well, that's not, it never says anything like that at all. And the other side's like, well, we just don't want a bunch of people grooming young kids, which also I can agree,
sure,
I can agree with both of those sides. So do you have any, like,
I mean, kind of what I knew already was basically what they said. So there wasn't anything new that it was kind of presented there. I think, like you said, man, the digging deeper, the what and then the why. Like, I mean, I guess, like, why was that bill written? I mean, is it going on in classrooms? Like, have they taken, a deep dive into that and done any studies, or do they have any statistics, or like what's going on there? There's a reason that was formulated. Mm-hmm. And then I guess, like, if there is a reason, or all of a sudden, 50% of schools are teaching, gender orientation, or they're teaching, and that's just an arbitrary number. I don't know that. Like, was that written so that they focus on other things that are the building blocks of the kids need from kindergarten to third grade? Is that why they're doing this? Does it have anything at all to do with, the fact that the Republicans typically are more conservative and Democrats are like, hey, they don't like gay people, they don't like trans people, all that thing.
I'm sure all those things.
Yeah, well, like, how much of that is actually there? Or is it just to, hey, kids need to learn these fundamentals, otherwise we're going to miss these building blocks, and when they develop, they're not going to know how to, do this thing, or they're not going to know how to do that thing. See, there's a lot more that goes into that question that you ask, and it's like, I don't know, man. I mean, I like the idea of kids learning the building blocks that they need to know.
Mhm.
Is that sexual orientation part of the building blocks? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, and I would even play
One of
devil's.
the questions.
Yeah,
excuse me.
yeah, absolutely one of the questions. Because at the same time, is that even a question that needs to be asked? Because is this thing really saying that we can't? That those conversations can't 100%. Happen. It's because there's a difference between you're not allowed
to have them or specifically instructing someone.
Right, you're actually having a class for this.
Yeah,
because I don't think like, and also you have to look at the age group, because I think this is supposed to be targeted, and I think there's verbiage in the bill that targets it to like elementary age students.
Yeah, and I mean they said what? They said kindergarten through third grade, I think.
Yeah, and obviously the question there was like, could this reach out further? And that's where all the legal stuff comes in. But if we are, for the sake of conversation, if we're going to say, all right, this bill is targeted at that K through third grade, elementary, age students. So you're looking at, up to 9-10 years old. And that's like, if it caps off there, is this actually preventing people from having those discussions? Or like you said, is it, hey, we can't have actual curriculum based around this? Those are two very, very, very different things.
Yeah, and I'm not one to stymie organic conversations. Like if something pops up, then I mean it should probably be addressed.
Yeah.
Even if it's, hey, this isn't age appropriate, or hey, this is something that maybe we learn a little bit later on, or hey, this is something you ask your parents, or hey, this is something that I believe. Which, and I don't know. You're getting into those ages, man, where it's hard. Like, how much are they going to understand? But I don't know. For me, man, it's even if you were like, hey, we're going to teach you about straight people, or we're going to teach you about a man and a woman getting married. Like, we got other stuff to focus on.
Why?
Yeah, like
what's
we've got
the purpose of
math,
this?
We've got reading, writing. Like we've got all these building blocks that developmentally need to be there so that you can even go on to understand or to read about this bill, or to. I feel like I don't know, man. Some things need to be in place before we.
Yeah, and I'll even say I'm okay with talking about in school. I think there should be a part of school that is discussing, interpersonal relationships and how, people should be treated and the respect of others.
Yeah.
That's a big part of that age group. What you're 5 or 6 to 10, 5 to 10, whatever it is. Like that's a big part of that age is, all right, not only are we learning how to read, write, tie our fucking shoes, but we're learning how to treat people, what people
socially interact.
Yeah. Social interaction and how to speak, like how to use our words properly. Like if anybody's, if you got kids or nephews or nieces, like that 5 to 10 year range, all right, they can speak. Now let's teach them how to speak, how to interact with other people, how to be cognizant of other people's feelings.
Yeah. Politely respectful.
Yeah. Like, so like, I'm okay with that kind of like, I think those things should be, but I think that's kind of like not necessarily a side conversation at school, but I think it's something that should be encouraged and talked about freely at school. But you bring up a good point of, to what level should we have these conversations in school? If you've listened to the show, Cass and I have been very open about how we interact with our child. And I've even admitted that sometimes maybe we have too advanced discussions for her. Maybe not. Little brag. She took like, they do those testing things. Yeah. It was, I don't know. She's got some test back where she tested really high and she has superior cognitive ability or something like that. And we're like, that's fun. Like it was one line in it, it cracked me up. It was like anything that like, if your kid, if they, all the basic things to knowledge and putting pieces together, but it's like, if they think outside of the box, they're very creative, imaginative. And then it just like slipped it in there. Unusual sense of humor. I read it and I started dying laughing. I'm like, oh God. I said, I hope maybe, I don't know. She might, for a 10-year-old, she probably has an unusual sense of humor because like,
bro, that goes back to your like, ooh, that one was a miss. Don't do that. That was a hit.
Yeah. So like we tried like, and I heard, I heard a conversation recently that, there was a study done that when maybe not a study, it was like a long-term study, or they found, maybe it was something that like research has found over the long haul, that parents, particularly parents that good, or I don't want to say good parents, that's not what I want to say. Children that excel, their parents are always communicating with them just outside of their comprehension. So it's that kind of like that, not necessarily the carrot and stick idea because of reward, but like, let's advance like just a little bit higher than what you can understand. I don't know. I probably say to our kid probably 30 times a week, if not more. I'll say something. Do you understand that? And if she's not like right off the bat, yep, it's, hold on, are you sure? Because you seem kind of your question. Like we'll dissect this a little more, but do you understand what I'm saying? So like we've always tried to do that. And one of the things like we did, we told the story joking about how Cass one day when she was asking about the Easter bunny, she's like, well, I don't want you guys to lie to me. And we're like, well, yeah, we're the tooth fairy. It was like, we're the tooth fairy. And it was like, oh, by the way, Santa Claus isn't real either. And it was like, what? But at the same time, we very much followed that up with, but that's not your job to tell all the other kids. Yeah. It's not your job to tell your cousins. It's not your, like, you already knew it because we saw you were asking pointed questions to get us to either lie to you or avoid the question or just answer it blatantly. And we always want to tell you the truth. We always want you to come to us and be able to talk to us open and honestly. But that's not your job as a 10-year-old to have open and honest conversations with other 10-year-olds. Don't do that. Like, because if you start doing that, then we're going to have to start dialing back, the maturity of the conversations that we have with you.
Sure.
So I think that's really important, that age group. Like some kids, regardless of their cognitive ability or intelligence level, that age group, like people you just develop at different rates.
Yeah.
They say like what girls typically develop like 5 to 7 years faster than boys do. Like, which I can totally see that. Fuck, I didn't develop until I was like 30. So, you know what I mean? So like, I think that's part of an important piece of that conversation is from a parent perspective, do I want somebody having these conversations unknowingly to me with my child? Because I don't know, like, what's the context?
Yeah.
What are you telling them? How much of this information, like how graphic are you being? Because there are some things where we don't even let her listen to like, music and different things. She loves music and movies, and we watch movies that we try to ride that line. But there's a lot of things where like, no, bro, you're just way too young for that. Yeah. Because you understand that like your mind at that age is so malleable and different than what it's going to be in 10 years from now. Like, no, you're just not ready for that. Like your brain can't handle that because you're jumping these building blocks. It's like going, all right, so we got fractions down, folks. We did subtraction and multiplication last year. We did fractions this year. So we're going to start off. We got physics 2. We're going to jump into that and, Newton's laws and all these things. And like, wait a minute, hold on. Like this might be a little too advanced. You're right. Sorry. Calculus. We're going into calculus next. Like, wait, so there's building blocks that you have to like build. You have to place all these things on top of the foundation and slowly build up. Yeah. Even at an advanced age. And I guess that's my question is like, when it comes to sexual orientation and gender identities, that opens the door to a lot of other things that can be confusing, if nothing else, for kids that age. It's like, where do we, is there a specific line we have to draw, or can we let's discuss these things and making sure like the curriculum isn't stepping outside of what isn't, I don't even say necessary, but what is healthy for a 7-year-old to learn.
Yeah. I think the other thing that you have to account for too is the impressionability at those ages and the fact that like you're literally still trying to figure out who you are. And I don't know what they're going to teach or the things that are said, but I think some of those things, kids might question things or go, man, I don't understand that. So maybe that applies to me in a certain way, or I don't know. It's interesting to think about like that influence and what that might do to someone kind of like long term in their thinking or their processes. Um, if you hear something so many times or you think it so many times, then sometimes it becomes a truth.
Yeah. And it's hard because we have to trying to balance the societal norms. Cause I do agree. There are some things like going as far, we've talked about, toxic masculinity. I will say, I think toxic masculinity is a thing.
Yeah.
But my line for toxic masculinity might be very, very different than somebody else's. You know what I mean? That gradient of like, how extreme are we getting here? And to that point, it's just like how much information is too much information at a certain point.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I think of these, these scenarios or these like you have some little girls and they start playing with boy toys and they're a tomboy. But like, I guess if someone says, well, no, that's not a tomboy. Like maybe you're actually a boy.
Yeah. You just think you're like, what?
Yeah. Or maybe you're actually, and then that's in their head and they're like, well, maybe I am a boy. And they start thinking that more and more. And it's like, yeah, I don't know, man. I feel like that gets a little bit slippery.
It does.
When it's like, no, you just enjoy playing outside or just, we shouldn't have assigned this, or just like boys that play with like Barbie dolls. Like, yeah, no, that doesn't mean you're a girl. Like you just like toys and you can play with other things. Like it's, there's all kinds of things that go, back and forth on the gender spectrum, I guess, that are okay to, there's dudes that paint their fingernails all the time. Like, they like to paint their fingernails. It doesn't mean it like, does it really mean anything more than that?
Yeah. Does that mean they like dudes?
Or they
like
just,
what?
they just like to paint their fingernails. Or like, a dude likes to drink a Mai Tai with an umbrella in it. Like, fruity drink, a girly drink. Like,
it doesn't mean he likes anal. Like, but you know what I mean? That's like, that's all that we jump to it so quick from both sides where it's like, well, goddamn boys playing with Barbies. I ain't gonna raise no whatever, profanity, like slang term you want to use. But like, no, like, so like, I think I think boys particularly have a lot of that pressure on them, and a lot now. I think there's more discussion around that's coming out, but like, I think there's a lot of boys that like have that perception that, well, I have to do this, or if I do this, that, well, I can't do that because that means I'm gay. Like, and okay, maybe you are, but those two things are completely different.
Yeah.
And like when they need to be handled completely differently. Like, I listened to, I follow, was it Rob Kearney? He's a world's strongest man competitor.
Okay.
And he's openly gay. His Instagram is world's strongest gay.
Yeah. Like, that was the dude on Rogan that gave him the ammonia sniffing stuff, wasn't it?
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
Because I've seen Rogan like bring that out for different people to have them sniff it.
Dude,
and just annihilate them.
Those salts are rough, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, so like, all right. So if you look at that dude and like, we have to like break down all these like silly perceptions we have, because like, if that guy wasn't wearing super bright fluorescent tights and a pink mohawk to powerlift in, the stereotypical American male would look at that guy and be like, man, that guy's a badass. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, I like dudes. Oh, you're not, like, all of a sudden that changes how badass he is.
No, dude's still
like,
badass.
You know what the fuck? So like, but then they see him wearing like the colored, like, cause I think he's gone to different countries and really pushed the limit. Cause a lot of countries, like, guess what? Like, is homosexual even a proper term anymore? Can we use that without being?
I don't know what the proper terminology is.
I feel like that's the scientific term of it, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, but like that's illegal. So like he's pushed it, like wearing like, I heard him talk about the one country he was in. It was real. Like he's had to not compete in competitions before because they were held in certain countries where being gay was illegal. So he's like, I have to make that decision. Like, do I compete in the sport that I love and pretend not to be gay?
Yeah.
Or do I go there and be me and fear being arrested? Or do I just not do it? So it's like, he wears like whatever he wants to wear, but like we've always like people are so quick to categorize don't judge a book by its cover. And we're so quick to judge that book by its cover, regardless of what it is, good or bad. And we lose track of like, let's drill down on these things. Like, is this really affecting? Like, what does all of this stuff mean? And it's just, we just need more of it. And I don't know. It just, I'm encouraged because I see more of this happening. Like this article, like that was the most encouraging thing about like finding an article on, a mainstream media source and not entirely feeling like it was all just bias and propaganda for me just to shove down my throat. So it's just, if we take a couple extra minutes or days and time to look at something and go, all right, what does this mean? Does this mean really what I think it is? Is this bill really outlawing people from saying the word gay? Like, no, it's not. Well, is it trying to outlaw grooming of children? I don't know if I don't know if the verbiage in that is that way either. Like, I don't think people should be groomed to be either way, one way or the other. I think that was the whole idea of separation of church and state, right? Like, hey, like we need to keep our government and our religious beliefs separated. And I think that's probably a good thing. We don't necessarily need all these but I mean, there's a lot of things in government that probably should be removed as well, but that's a whole different discussion for a different day. But I think that's good. Keeping like all these things separate and being able to deal with them individually and saying, all right, what's the goal here? What are we really trying to get at? Should we really be concerned about this?
I think that's just, I was thinking of something I've said multiple times from that philosophy professor, just a hermeneutic of suspicion, and hermeneutics in general, the interpretation of text. That's kind of what we're talking about right here, man. And usually it's something like biblical or something that's, but I mean, law, like the hermeneutics, the interpretation of that. And then I think just going back to what you were saying, man, like the what and the why. And I still would be interested to know like some of those answers, the people that actually proposed the law.
Right. And that's the hard part too. Like when you bring government into this, and these people we've talked about government and, nepotism and cronyism and all these different things. And some people are just, that's the only option they had because their daddy was a senator. So they were just a shoe in because somebody can line their pockets with enough money for them to control whatever. But like, what's the purpose of this? And it's hard because you have to use your words so precisely, because everybody now, if they have enough money, they can pay somebody enough to interpret something a different way. And if they're good enough at interpreting something differently, using words properly and articulating that argument well enough, well, then they can win. So it's like, one hand, I think it's a good thing to truly dissect what words mean in being able to argue those things. And maybe the harder thing to figure out is, why do we always have to bring that to conflict of, well, this is what I think it means and screw you. And I'm suing you, instead of going, all right, how can we work together and figure out what's an appropriate, setting, place, law, rule, classroom setting, curriculum. Like, how do we do that as people? And I think we battle every day, particularly in government and politics and social media and dealing with people, is that we fail to look outside of our close-knit, like, orbital space. We hold our own views and ideas so dearly that it hurts to change them. It hurts to be wrong. And it also, I think it affects people because they don't want to realize that, hey, like, somebody's different. And that's just, no matter what you do, that person's just going to be different, regardless of what you tell them, how much love you show them, how much hate you show them. People are going to be different across the board. So that acceptance piece is sometimes can be difficult for people to go, well, that person's different. And well, I'm okay with that, because they feel like a lot of times I think it's a subconscious thing where we feel threatened by somebody else's existence. And I don't know if that's just in our genes. You know what I mean? It's just something we can't get rid of, that tribalism that we're just like evolved into. But to me, I think I look at it and I keep on asking those questions and drill down to, well, maybe if I can accept the difference in people, just maybe they can have the same idea and accept the differences in me. Because do I want somebody changing who I am and against what I believe? Like, no. So why would we expect that we have the right to do that to somebody else? But that's the broad spectrum of that. Because then it goes back to, is it kind, necessary, and
True,
all those
kind,
things.
necessary, encouraging.
Yeah, like
I just wonder if they should bring the duel back.
it's not a bad idea.
Yeah,
Back to back,
well,
10 paces, and different.
no, yeah, absolutely. But with still old, like very antiquated weapons. But as a consequence, though, so like you've got the the bipartisans. And it sounded like what you were speaking of is, why can't there be more gentlemanly conversations where both sides sit down and we come to some sort of an equitable compromise that, okay for this side, okay for that side. If you can't, it's time to duel. And then someone dies or they get, maimed or injured or something, and something's going to change. It's going to change.
Yeah.
Or more people are going to die, and then eventually it's going to change.
Yeah. I think there is a, as much as I hate to say this, I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to. There is a place for violence.
Yeah, I would say as an absolute, that's jokingly what I'm saying. That obviously as a very last resort.
Yeah, but sometimes, guess what? Like, if somebody, I just can't think of any better example than someone breaks into your house and they come into your bedroom, or they come into your kid's bedroom with a knife or a gun. What are you going to do? What is there to do? At some point, life is, I live or I die. Obviously, I don't advocate violence, and unless you're smacking the shit out of somebody for talking shit to your wife. No, but you know what I mean? But that's not something that that should be our last resort.
Absolutely.
But sometimes the last resort is the last resort. So it's either, sometimes your last resort is, I have to do something drastic, or I am succumbing to my own death.
Yeah, I guess when all diplomacy fails to cause change, there has to be some level of action.
Yeah, and I think we're very, very far from any type of broad spread like violence by any means. But I think those people, I guess I say all that to say, those people are like, violence is never the answer. Well, I get the sentiment, but sometimes that's the only answer you have left. So to say for certain one thing is always one thing, and that's all it'll ever be, that's the whole point. Like, no, it's not. Everybody, I was thinking about this earlier, like everybody wants to live in, growing up, I used to think everything was black and white. And I don't know if that was a product of just the environment that I grew up in, or if it was the teaching, or if it was just as a kid, you think like, well, it's either is or it isn't, right? Yeah. I don't know. Like, I love math. That's why I love math, because math always is, it is or it isn't. Like, you got the right answer, you got the wrong answer. I think when you get into like theoretical physics and things, like, things get a little squirrely on you, but when you realize like that's not life, like, cause we're humans and we are not one thing or the other. We're not, like, nothing is ever one thing or the other. So you always have to address things with that. All right, how much of this thing is this thing or the other?
Yeah.
Is it 90%? Well, I'm pretty sure on that one. Or is it like 50-50? Well, I don't know. Maybe I'll just keep my mouth shut. I don't know. And I think this is a perfect, this grooming, don't say gay bill is a perfect example of a bunch of people taking something, putting a name on it, and trying to make it something that's not. Whether what it is, I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say we might need some more clarity on what it truly is.
Yeah, I don't know what it
instruction.
is, but I feel like it's not necessarily, most of the time, it's not necessarily one thing or the other. It's this.
Yeah, gray, not quite dichotomy. So I got to pee if you want to pause this.
Yeah, okay. Oh, okay. I don't know where we were at or taking any of that, but I think it's just another good example of what we've tried to do here, is to look through all of the things and not just take something at face value and go that extra 10 questions deep. The why, like why this, and what's the purpose, and how do we parse all that information out? I think that's a good word, parsing it, breaking everything down, being meticulous with it. Parsing your past participles. That was an early episode. You talk about past participles. I think I know what it means now, but it's, I saw a good example was like, this is it's silly, but I think it represents it really well. Like, are the baked beans overcooked? And if they're overcooked, are they baked too long? So are they overbaked baked beans? Is this an adjective or is this a verb? Like, let's like, as silly as it is, like, we can break all these things down and say like the beans were baked too long. And if you bake beans, any kind of bean, does that now make them baked beans? Or because when I say baked beans, what do you first think of?
Like the beans in a can.
Yeah,
go with barbecue.
Yeah, you got barbecue,
bushes.
Whatever. Yeah, the bushes baked, But if I take lima beans and put them in the oven and pull them out, like, hey, we got some baked beans, and I throw a bunch of fucking lima beans on your plate,
we're not
you're
friends anymore, bro.
What the fuck are these? These are baked beans.
Lima beans.
But like,
no, I know.
No, yeah, these are beans that are baked. Like, are they baked beans or are they baked beans? I guess it depends on how you interpret the words and how you parse all of those things out.
I keep going back to just like, and I'm not like, I don't want to ever downplay this or have anyone think like, oh man, like he thinks that's not important. He doesn't value this or that.
No, and I think real quick, I think that's the point. Like, the fact that we're doing an entire show on this, and we're obviously be a short episode, but like, that shows how important we feel it to be.
Yeah. Literally my next point was going to be, how important is it really though? And like, why do we deem it important? And it goes back to some things we've said, and I'm not trying to downplay any of this, but I just, man, like, I know we're in different times, and I'm not trying to compare those things, but just problems in general, and like problems to one person not being problems, or, being first world problems, or we think of these things and it's like, I mean, do you think that they're discussing don't say gay in Ukraine right now?
Yeah. No, it's a good point.
Everything good on the recording? And
yeah, sorry.
No, you're good.
No, we've talked about that ad nauseum here. Like, how easy we had it in this nation. And granted, I think like how easy we had it for 100 years. It's been really easy for 100 years. But how quick can that change? And you can see the developments around things and how quickly, things can change, right next door versus across the world. Is it a problem? I don't know. I would say if enough people get worked up over it, it could be a problem down the road. So, how much weight do you put on it?
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. Like the investment, like how much do you invest in it is my question. Like, Are there other things going on that are a better investment, or other things that we should focus more on? And I know these are like grand, broad questions. And like I said, I'm never trying to downplay, I don't want someone that's in the trans community going, well, he doesn't, what do you mean that he thinks this isn't important? I'm not saying that that's not important.
Oh,
it's
absolutely. Yeah.
It's, man, there's a ton of other things going on, and I don't know.
Yeah, I guess in my mind, I clarify that a little bit by like, I do think the feelings and the lives and what, whether it be gay or trans or, LGBTQ, I think it's 2IA plus, is like trying to cover all the bases, is I feel for those people because they've not only obviously gone through hardships, whether anything, dealing with people, whether it be, racial inequalities or religious, and like any type of background or any type of identifier that people have, that's a concern for people in general. And we want to like, I guess I have a problem with all the way the inclusivity discussions are being had. Maybe it's just because I want to be really inclusive and I care about everybody and I care about, how they feel and whatnot. But it almost like, it's always like, I feel like I'm like, I've been through plenty of diversity and equity and inclusion trainings and different things. And I don't know if it's a personal thing for me that I feel like I'm being attacked, like because I'm a white guy, that means I can't be inclusive. Like it's always that. And I know it's like fucking white dude problems, right? Get the fuck out of here. But when I'm constantly being like, anytime, a lot of these discussions they start out with being like, how might you be privileged? And the first two things are always, well, you're male and you're white. Those two, that might, and it's like a list of 30 things, but those are always like that, which I get. White dudes, mentioned before, have had a pretty good run of it, and there have been a bunch of dicks for the most part, generalized over society. Like the white guys have usually been the pretty, well, there's always Genghis Khan, those people, but whatever. But it's, how can we start having these discussions more constructively? And we don't have to, maybe this is what it is. This is finally what I was getting to. The whole like last minute was not great. Instead of having these discussions about pointing out why people have had it better throughout history, and I know this sounds like a white guy talking, but why don't we start having more discussions about embracing each other, regardless, whatever it is? And it's not like we have to put like negatives. There's always a place for the pros and cons, the goods and bads, the positives and negatives. But sometimes I think introducing negatives just for just to introduce negatives and positives is only going to result in additional negatives. So why can't we, love everybody, all positive thoughts, brother? And like, I get it, but like sometimes when we're dealing with person to person that, we only last, I don't know, 60 to 100 years. And we're still having these discussions, these vast discussions around things that happened well before any of our generations in a very negative light, and bringing them into the future. So like, we can recognize that terrible, terrible things have happened by these certain people. Terrible things are happening by these certain people that have these identifiers. But just because there are people now that have the same identifiers as the shitty people in the past, why do we need to bring those and connect those two together? Because I guess maybe that's here we go. I'll say it. The worst thing about being a white guy is the fact that white guys have had it really good. Like, but I know I say that, and there's a lot of people that could be upset by that, but you have no idea my childhood, what I went through, and if I was privileged or not, because I was white and I had a penis. Like, do you have any idea what I've gone through? Like, no, I don't have any idea what you've gone through. So why are we judging people on the color of our skin, or whether we have a dick or not, or whether we feel like we should have one or not, or whatever? Like, why can't we stop all that bullshit and just start looking at each other as, oh, this is another human being. First, would you like to kill me? No? okay, that's out of the way. We don't want to kill each other. So now like, let's start breaking those down and like creating bonds with people and relationships and just seeing for each other, like personality and who you are as a person and your like soul or whatever it is you believe that it functions and operates this meat sack that we travel around in. Like why should we treat people different on any level because their meat sack is different than ours? Like, I don't know. That's, I guess if I can bring it all the way back around to the white guy bitching about being white to that's, I guess that's why I see it. Cause like, why is me being white any more of an important identifier than calling somebody out for being black or being a woman or being trans or being gay? I'd like to hear a good explanation because I don't know. Cause that's how I view it. Is I don't care what you are, what you identify as, like it's all about who you are and the person that.
I mean, I think the argument would be not everyone's like that. I think that's what they would say. For
sure. But how do you, it's like, I listened to a podcast. I wish I remember his name now. He was, you might be able to pull his name out of your ass. Older black gentleman, musician, really famous, not really famous, but famous in that circle. That has traveled around the world, and he's been like instrumental in turning like
200,
like 200 to 300 plus KKK members like away and turning them away. That like he's got like, I don't know if he does this, but so supposedly he's had a bunch of KKK members. Like he's talked to them and had genuine conversations with these racist KKK members. He sits down with them and talks to them, and he's like, basically, I don't know what the word is, but basically like gotten them out of, their racist ways.
Yeah.
And like, they'll give them like their KKK robes and stuff. Like, how fucking cool would it be if that guy had a giant fucking walk-in closet of all of the KKK robes that he's collected from people that like, they're like, you know what?
I feel like his name's Daryl something.
I know I should know it because I've heard multiple conversations with him, and he's such a cool dude. Like, but that's his like, I really connect with his way of thinking of like, look, like these are just people that, whether they grew up with, influences that were just outside of their control, or they just have never interacted.
Daryl Davis. Like it's I guess his way of looking at it is, instead of being angry at these people that hate me for being black, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit down. I'm going to do my best to be a good human to these people. And I'm going to show them, like, even though he doesn't have to, he could hate them, and rightfully so. You know what I mean? Like, he could be like, yeah, fuck you guys. You guys are a bunch of ignorant fucks. Like, fuck off. But instead of that, he goes, you know what? I'm going to be a good human being. I'm going to sit down and talk with these folks and show them that, like, I might look a little different. I might sound a little different than, the people you normally hang out with. And all of a sudden, after sitting down with that person, and I guess maybe more, I see it more and more as we do this. And I, see people sit across from our table, and they're different in whatever way, shape, or form, different in their thought process or whatever it is. And it's like, hey, we're just all trying to get through this. And we're all just trying to do the best we can. Or maybe we're not all trying to do the best we can, but we're all trying to live the best life we can. Yeah.
In a sense, whatever that means to you, but showing that love.
But that I was literally going to say, going back to what we talked about with Tim, the umbrella of love. Mm-hmm. And that, I guess when I think of that, man, that's the stuff that, like, I hope that they're teaching in schools.
Yeah.
Because if they do that, then all the other stuff doesn't even matter.
Raise your kids to not be dicks, to be good people. That's always been our concern as parents.
Yeah.
Like, with all the teacher conferences that we've had and different things, like, our very first question is, like, or those be like, hey, she's doing great in this. Like, oh, she's such a good reader, this, that, whatever. Like, I don't know how many times, she's only in fourth grade or whatever. But it's like, is she a good person? Is she nice? Like, we don't want her to be a pushover.
Yeah.
We've had some calls that are confrontations have happened, and sometimes life has confrontations.
True.
But that's always the concern was, is she a good person? Like, is she nice?
Yeah.
Is she polite? Is she respectful? Like, I don't like if those like things aren't at the top of your list of being a human being, then you're going to have some struggles in your life. Unnecessary, I think.
Here's I was going to say quick question, but it could turn into something long, so I won't turn it into something long. But
whatever.
No, I was just thinking about this gender orientation and sexuality, and I was just thinking, what if instead of like a male and a female, what if everyone was just in like more androgynous, and or males and females could have children, and like for two dudes to be with each other, there's you're gonna have a child. Like there's in a reproductive sense.
Yeah, biologically viable.
Yeah, well, it would be interesting to think of the world if in one of those scenarios, or like with the androgynous, if you were like a hermaphrodite, so you didn't need anybody else to create life.
Soon we might not.
Yeah.
Petri dish babies.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the features of everything's becoming more androgynous, but I guess like if you weren't, no one's focused on sex, no one's focused on those things. Like, where are we at as a society? Have we created other things? Are we already living on Mars? Like, because that's removed, and you're not focused on that, or
that's been a huge rift throughout
all time. Yeah. Or do we create new problems?
Yeah. What would the new problem be, you think? I think that's a phenomenal question. I think that's a phenomenal mind experiment to do. So, and you all out there, you can pause this and think about that for 15 minutes or whatever. Like, that's a really good, like, what would that be? Because all the way back to even in the animal kingdom, biological males and females, like when those animal groups are very distinct, have different roles.
Yeah.
So like, that's an interesting, I'm gonna have to think of that one for a while.
Yeah, no, it's just
but what would the problems be then?
Oh, there would be something, man. I'd have to think about that. So you got
that'd be an entirely different world.
Yeah, it would be an entirely different world. I don't know.
Yeah, but like, and that's the thing. Like, I think about that often. Not that specifically, sure. But like the difference of the worlds would be like if one thing was changed, we wouldn't know it was changed. It would just be life.
Yeah.
And this is what we're dealing with now. So like, how much would that change the world that we live in? Well, does that matter? No, because that would just be the world we live in. So bringing it full circle, then what would matter is the same thing that matters now. How we treat each other, the way we approach, personally, ideas, thoughts, how each other, that critical thinking aspect of like, how do we go about, trying to find solutions to these problems, whatever it is, that's still all that matters. And that's what I really like about bringing all the way back to the beginning of the conversation where like the gentleman was talking about, don't just stop at your first question. Even if that's the only question you had, go 10 more questions, go deep. Go 10 more questions. Think about it. Like, what's the next question you think you could ask about this certain thing? Like, keep going deeper, because that's what really matters is the questions that we can ask and the way we think about those things.
It's interesting you said that way, because kind of in my mind, this question popped in my head. And I've never really had a conversation with someone that had a strong stance against like gay people. But I was just like, well, why would they not like gay people? And then if they were like, is it they don't like it because if everyone was gay, we don't exist? Is it because they were taught that way? Like, why is it? And then, like, if you just continued to, if you just ask questions until you got to the root of it, like more and more and deeper questions, right. I wonder what they would say. Like, are they worried that they might have some underlying attraction to dudes and that they think they're gay? Or
I think that's learned as well.
Is it being judged by other people? Like, man, what is that and why is that? And I don't know. It goes back to those gentlemanly conversations, I think.
So I think this is, I would be willing to put money on this. That kind of conversation you're talking about, I'd be willing to bet that most people don't get beyond question number 1 or 2 in their own minds. It's wrong, it's right. Why? Because this. And that's as far as they go. You get down to question 3, 4, 5, maybe a slight percentage of people have gone that far. But then you really but the people that are most willing to have those conversations and most willing to have them calmly and collectively and consider other people's opinions are the ones that are thinking, 6, 7, 8, 10 questions deep into that and questioning themselves. It goes back to what you said a long time ago. Having an honest self-appraisal.
I literally knew that's where it was headed next.
Yeah, but that's what it's
word.
like. It's looking at yourself, the same way you look at other people. Why? If you have a genuine enough curiosity, is why do you think this? Why do you think that? Like, I don't think enough people do that to themselves. Because if you get especially when it comes to politics or something serious or something like this, if you were to strike up a random conversation with anybody on the street, most people would have an opinion on this certain thing, right? Just boom. But then if you ask them the next question and ask them another question, you're going to get some people will have an answer for you. But the more questions you ask about why they feel the way they do and why they think the way they think, the more questions you ask people, the clarity of responses is going to decline gratefully. No, not gratefully, greatly. You know what I mean? So I think that's what it is that guys just continue to ask questions, and maybe let's continue to ask ourselves questions so we can figure out why we think what we think before we put somebody else in the spotlight.
Yeah. I can't remember the quote, but it was something like, oftentimes if we have a problem with something, the answer starts by looking in the mirror first.
That sounds good. If everybody has a problem except for you,
you're probably the
maybe
problem.
You're the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, that mirror thing just goes back to the soul. You ask yourself, well, why do I think this way?
Yeah. And keep asking, okay, this is why I think this way. Well, why do I think that? Well, this is why. Okay, but why do I think that? Because I think a perfect example of, bringing it back to because we grew up in I think we grew up in an interesting place where I've gotten a little bit of both sides, but I understand, like we talked about the kind of conservative side a little more because my history has been kind of based in that. But it's like, I could argue if I only had to go 2 or 3 questions deep, I could argue why homosexuality is a bad thing fairly easily. But when you start getting deeper into it, it's like, well, why do you think this? Well, because it's not, that's what I was taught. Okay, but why were you taught that? Well, because it's not natural. Okay, but do you know that there are species of animals that don't need an opposite sex to reproduce? Well, yeah, but they're not human. Well, yeah, but what's human? Well, and a lot of times it comes to a religious standpoint.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So and at that point, I can't argue with you. I can argue with you, but if that's what you believe.
Yeah. But my question would be then, if it was from that, shouldn't you do some hermeneutics into that religion as to why they believe that or why they said that? Was it because there weren't that many people in the world? And all of a sudden they're like, well, if dudes are doing dudes, this thing's not going to sustain itself, because you got to think their population was less. That's not why I'm saying they did
there's
that.
1,000 different ways you could take that. Just theoretical.
To keep
arguments.
Asking questions, even in your religion.
Yeah, but I think what it boils down to is this person, or are you, me, this person, willing to continue to go down that question road? Are you willing to ask the next question? Are you willing to pursue what's behind door number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? And you know what? That's where I think that most people don't go. I don't know if it's fear that they their mind, I guess you brought it up earlier. Is it fear? Is it this? Is it that? Or is it just they just don't want to, or they just don't even know how to, or they just don't care to? But I think it can be scary when you're questioning your own beliefs and thoughts and realizing that you don't know why you have certain beliefs and thoughts.
Yeah.
That's can be frightening. But what's living if you don't know what it is? If you don't know why or what? You feel a certain way or think a certain way. That's frightening to me now. Like, now I've thought about, like, why do you think this? I don't know. Oh my God, I don't know why I think a certain thing. That can be scary. Is that it?
Yeah, I'm good. I got lots of things to think about.
Brain hurts already. Thank you for joining us today. Remember, check out the website, chronic-curiosity.com, to join us at the forum, have some fun, interaction, pick you up a comfy t-shirt, or if you just want to support the show and donate, all that is on the website as well. Thank you. Until next time. See you.